Now Micah Miller trying to spring a pass ahead. Nobody in front of Jack Paling. Moves on with a blast and scores! Jack Paling.
We aren't giving up on chances, and we just got to bottom line execute.
Waits, passes in front. Great save, Pelosi, as she robs a Gopher in front of her. And that was number 8, Kippen Keller, on the grade A opportunity.
For me as a coach, that's the kind of D you're always looking for, because they don't grow on trees for sure, and he's done a really good job being a captain of a really young team this year.
It was a really cool thing to see for them to really appreciate what I've done on and off the ice.
To the far half wall, Jack Paling trying to play it into the corner. Now Paling turns, squares his body to the slot, sends it up high toward Jack. A shot makes its way through, and they score! Right along the blue line, Nick Paling was in front of the net, and St. Cloud State's got a lead here in the
And welcome back to The Den, Husky Warmer-Nosed Podcast fans, at episode number 32, along with Noah Grant. I'm Nick Maxon. Noah, it's Friday, October 9th. It's kind of a milestone day for me, although I'm going to let you have some fun with that. It's been, what would you call it, 34 laps around the big ball of fire that's some odd millions of miles away from me. So something like that. That's really about it.
Today, I thought today was just Friday. I don't really know.
I mean, it really is. So it's, when you get to my age, honestly, it's just a Friday.
I kind of wish we were in episode number 34. I think that would be only more fitting. But Nick,
we're getting there. Trust me.
So I got to say, for the fans here, Friday, October 9th at exactly 7:00 right now. Happy birthday to you.
Oh my gosh.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nick. I really hate you. Happy 34th birthday, Mr. Nick.
Wow. I'm so uncomfortable right now.
You know what, Nick? I was really worried. I know that obviously the nursing home staff had to help you from your wheelchair to get to the studio tonight. I didn't know, episode 35 is still a question mark as to whether or not you're going to be healthy enough, but honestly, man, happy birthday. I think
I'm a game time decision every episode now. So
honestly, it's really cool. Like that, the fact that we are recording right now, it is your birthday today. It's not,
it is. Yes.
Your birthday is not Tuesday or whatever it is. It is today. So that's kind of cool. So happy birthday. My birthday is not for a little bit. I didn't get you a present because I can't flip you off on the screen here. Apparently they're not.
You already did before we started recording. So I've already received my present in full, and thank you for that. I'll be cherishing that one.
Well, absolutely. On kind of like a sadder note, I guess, I know that we mentioned like my dog a few weeks ago, and unfortunately, we are finding out, pretty much almost for certain, I found out today that we are probably going to have to put him down next week. So that's always really tough. Nick, I'm still kind of curious when they're going to put you down. I don't.
That's, it's a day-by-day basis. I think, when you ask the head coach, it's, game time decision, or, it's just going to be one of those, 10-day IR time decisions. So I don't know. We'll see. See how the medication goes. And, if I'm still breathing, taking in nourishment, then I think we're still good to go. So it's a decision above my pay grade, I'll put it that way.
Just make sure you don't take any hydroxychloroquine. Anyway, speaking of, I put that one in there. Sorry. Speaking of like things falling down, I kind of had a funny story at work today, Nick. For anybody who doesn't know, I work at a small college called Dakota College at Botno, which is right near the International Peace Gardens, smack dab in the middle of North Dakota. For all the rest of you folks that aren't North Dakota, it's not in Minnesota, so don't worry about it. So what we do is physical plant. So we're like the maintenance people who replace shelves and, yada, yada, the people behind the scenes. Well, we get done with work at 4:00. So at 3:45, we got done finishing whatever we were working on. And we're like, okay, we've got this shelf, this little partition that has to go in for this lady in the business office. Let's go. Let's do it. It's 4 bolts. We'll get it done. Go home for the weekend. Well, we get in there and, we say, hey, can we get this done for you? And she goes, sure. Well, her kid was in there. And her kid's kind of, he might have been, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, something like that. And he's kind of a chunkier little fella. I don't know. That's probably the easiest way to put that. Nice kid though. But I mean, so he was kind of like in our way, and we asked him to kind of move. So he moves, and we're putting in, the back part of the shelf and securing it into the desk. And then we have to come around to the front of the desk to screw in the bolts on the other side, right? So we're coming around to the other side, and this kid is like, he moved from where we were to now where we're trying to go. So we're kind of just like, okay, like, is he going to move and stuff? And this mom, kind of how like Midwestern moms are, where they don't like talk to their kids. They just kind of grab them and like act like you're repo men and try to get them out of the way right away. Well, she grabs her kid and she tries to move him out of the way. Well, he's facing the other way. So he's completely oblivious to what's going on. And she pulls him down on accident, and he like smacks into the side of the counter and like rolls over his hand. But he's like underneath where we're trying to be. And we're like done with work in like 5 minutes. And this kid's like rolling on the floor, just bawling his eyes out, holding his finger. His mom's like trying to get him an ice pack. And he's like underneath us as we're trying to put this like,
oh boy.
Like, I don't get paid enough to do this. So a word to the wise for any parents out there: if your kid's in the way of somebody else and they're, cognizant of what is going on when you say stuff to them, just ask them to move. Don't grab them and rush them out of there and push them down to the ground, because it was a very awkward experience. I don't know if you've ever been like, what's the worst? Do you have like a form of corporal punishment, that you like think of as a kid from like your parents? Like, I remember one, I dropped the F-bomb to my mom when I was 13, and she paused, took a deep breath, and she just punched me square in the chest. I didn't see it coming. It was just, and now I know that's the line we just don't cross, right? Like,
Well, I'll go with one similar. My parents, more my mom, because my dad used to work in restaurants, so he was often gone during most of the days. We were home or when we were trying to get up. So my mom ran the house like a military drill sergeant camp. So there was, some would say that the punishment often didn't meet the crime. And meaning the crime or the punishment was much heavier than the crime would attend to. So I remember this very clearly. We used to live in Bloomington, pretty close to Bloomington High School, a suburb of Minneapolis, just south. And I remember dropping some type of bad word. And the old adage for, you call it the Midwestern tough love, don't do it, you're going to get your mouth washed out with soap. I thought that was just some sort of casual phrase to scare me. That was wrong. Nope, we went right to the bathroom. And if you ever thought what soft soap tastes like, it tastes like crap, just so you know. It didn't help the swaying problem. I just was smart enough not to do it in front of my parents. So, yeah, it was not very fun.
The only other instance I can remember, I remember my cousin, ticked off my aunt one time, and they were kind of going back and forth in the house. And the way the house is there's a kitchen and a living room, but in between the kitchen and the living room is kind of where the downstairs, comes up in the little hallway that, separates it. And I remember just kind of hearing them back and forth arguing, and I come up to see what's going on. And right as I step up the stairs, wooden spoon flying through the air, clunk, right in the back of my cousin's head. And I'm just like, okay. And I just turned around and I went right back down the stairs. I'm like, I am not getting in the middle of this. So
yep. Smart idea.
I don't know, Nick, that's probably enough parent torture stories here. We'd like to stay on the air. So let's jump right in. Two-line fan trivia. We did have a winner this week. Nick, we finally kept a scoreboard as well. So excited to kind of update all of you on that, but we'll jump right into two-line fan trivia.
Two-line fan trivia is your chance to win. Follow the Huskies Warming House podcast on Twitter @WarmingHouseDen. A new question will be asked every week. Be the first to tweet us the correct answer. Winners will be mentioned on the show, as well as a chance for prizes and more. One question, one answer, one winner. It's two-line trivia.
All right, Nick, two-line fan trivia. Of course, last week's guest was the Brodzinski Trio plus Lucille Brodzinski, daughter of Johnny. And what is his wife's name? Do you happen to remember?
You're asking the old guy.
Lauren, that's who it is.
Okay.
Lauren, why do I remember that? I have no idea. But this week's guest, Johnny Brodzinski, led the NCAA in goals with 22 in his freshman season in 2012-13. In 2017-18, Easton Brodzinski was second in freshman men's scoring with 24 points. Who was the leading freshman scorer in Easton's first year as a Husky? Brody Falconer earned his sixth win here. He is our all-time leader. Tinner Heath, otherwise known as the Tin Man, has 3 wins. Everybody else has 1. So leaderboard's pretty simple at this point. But Nick, who is the leading scorer in 2017-18 for that freshman class in Easton's freshman year? Do you know?
Is that Blake Lizotte?
It is Blake Lizotte. 6 wins for Brody Falconer. Blake Lizotte had 27 points as a rookie that year. 2.5 years later, of course, he's primed to be a key piece of that Los Angeles Kings organization. Pretty much, essentially, I believe the only college player, the only college free agent signing last year to play on opening night, if I'm not mistaken, in the NHL. Is that?
Pretty close. Blake Lizotte's a hell of a hockey player. I remember when my first year in radio watching him play, and not the biggest kid. He's 5'7", maybe 65, maybe 170. But just has a nose for the puck, great vision, just knows where to be with or without the puck. Very highly creative. He's got a good battle to him. He's very competitive and just smart when he has the puck on his stick. He's just a very fun player to watch. Great on the forecheck and even better in defensively too. So he's a fun player to watch. He certainly earned his spot in Los Angeles Kings roster, who was had a pretty good draft too, and we're going to get to that here a little bit later, Noah. But Los Angeles finally looking to kind of resurge itself from the basements of the NHL with from their 2014 Cup run.
Yeah, pretty good second overall pick for them in this draft this past week. Of course, this past week as well, we had a little draft of our own, so to speak. We did reveal our winners for our Huskies Warming House Road to 300 apparel giveaway. But more importantly, with that episode, which is out now, we had an interview with Mark Johnson on the 40th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice extravaganza. So definitely check it out. It'll be well worth your time. And also well worth your time should be Two Line Fan Trivia coming at you, of course, every Saturday. Next week is another chance at a free Huskies Warming House hat. Brody Falconer already has his hat. Tinner Heath already has his hat. Tinner Heath can win next week. Brody Falconer can't. So you got to be quick on the draw because I think he sets an alarm for 12 o'clock noon Central Time. So got to be on it. But always good to always exciting to finally be able to give away our apparel. Nick, I've got 72 t-shirts sitting in my house, and I'd like to give them away at some point.
You and me both, just to get not only the word of the podcast out, but also, free swag. Why not, right?
Absolutely. But speaking of free things, we're going to give you some free content and some roundup around the NHL in our Center Ice View news and notes. Nick, let's jump right to it.
Center Ice View news and notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
And in this week's edition of Center Ice View news and notes, not a lot of college news, certainly a lot of NHL news. Again, the draft was this past week, as well as NHL free agency started this morning, Noah Grant. But a small tidbit, we talk about Johnny Brodzinski signing a 1-year deal with the New York Rangers, a $700,000 cap hit from what we're seeing as far as reporting goes. I don't believe that's a confirmed amount, but congratulations to Johnny Brodzinski continuing his professional hockey career. But there's plenty of more NHL news to get around to, Noah, as we still have yet to wait for any NCHC season news. I should say the Big Ten did announce their season schedule, and they actually are partnering, and I thought this was cool, with the Arizona State Sun Devils as kind of a scheduling partner. So Arizona State, if I recall the press release correctly, would be playing every single game of their regular season on the road in a Big Ten schools venue, but we'll basically be able to play a full season. So very good on the Big Ten for getting something going. And number 2, for including an independent squad who is yet to really find a home with a bigger conference and allowing them to continue a season, Noah.
Yeah, super exciting. Obviously, once you mentioned earlier, Johnny Brodzinski, our guest last week, congratulations to him on getting getting to continue playing professional hockey. And, as far as the NCHC goes, the rumors that we've kind of heard, Grand Forks maybe a little bit, Nebraska as well is a pretty big front runner for a potential bubble. But, of course, just rumors. We'll let you know when we've had something confirmed, and we're looking forward to getting the hockey season started. And speaking of hockey season starting, Nick, let's jump over to some NHL news and a hockey season that basically just ended, but now the real meat and potatoes of the business world of NHL hockey has essentially started here. Let's start with some kind of free agent player signings, and it's only fitting with this year's class of a bevy, a swath, whatever you want to call it, of goaltenders here. We've got quite a few goalie signings and quite a few left on the market, so we'll rattle some of these off for you here, Nick. Jacob Markstrom, I would say, was probably the big one today, signing with the Calgary Flames, 6 years, $6 million average annual value. And on the flip side, Braden Holtby moves from Washington to the Vancouver Canucks. 2 years, 4.3 average annual value, and the deal does include a 4-team no-move clause. Washington Capitals, let's go down the list right there. Henrik Lundqvist, the king, getting up there in age, but gets his one-year deal at $1.5 million. Probably going to be the backup to Ilya Samsonov and be a veteran mentor in that group. And a veteran guy in Anton Khudobin, the Dallas Stars, spoke true to their word. A guy that potentially was going to test the free agent market gets 3 years, $3.5 million average annual value. Matt Murray traded to the Ottawa Senators for just re-signing 4 years and $6.25 million average annual value. Probably a move by Eugene Melnyk to essentially hit the cap floor for the Ottawa Senators in that one. Robin Lehner, of course, did re-sign about a week ago with the Vegas Golden Knights at 5 years and $5 million average annual value there. And then our one that we're going to kind of touch on a little bit in our later segment about the Minnesota Wild. You might hear a little bit of Minnesota Wild sprinkled in here and there, but we'll do a deep dive after the interview. Cam Talbot did sign with the Minnesota Wild, 3 years, $3.67 million average annual value. Some goalies left, Nick. Thomas Greiss, Corey Crawford, Corey Schneider's in that group, and Jimmy Howard is in that UFA group as well. And then Marc-Andre Fleury is actively being shopped by the Vegas Golden Knights as we speak, looking for a suitor to retain some salary, are the Vegas Golden Knights. So, Nick, out of all these signings, I mean, I guess maybe it was not that shocking that Jacob Markstrom ends up in Calgary after Cam Talbot, leaves essentially. Was there one that really stuck out to you as being surprising, in terms of, term, price tag, or just the team that he went to?
Braden Holtby a little bit, only because I would have thought that maybe he would have gotten more money than the 4.2 he's getting from Vancouver. But I'm not shocked, kind of flipping the script that they couldn't afford Jacob Markstrom. Again, you talk about this offseason as being a very particularly interesting offseason because of the flat cap. And people keep asking me, why is it that so many RFAs are getting deals and then all of a sudden they're getting signed by maybe the same team? Essentially, as an RFA, people forget that when you offer a sheet to an RFA, they're guaranteed a salary increase, which means the team that owns their rights has to offer them some type of increase. However, when you don't give them a qualifying offer, they become an unrestricted free agent, which means, all of the rest of the 30 NHL teams do get a crack at them. But as a team, it is a risk because guess what? You could sign them for less than what the QA could be, but you could also lose them to a better deal. The strategy now in this offseason is everybody's kind of in the same boat, right? Where every team is trying to shed cap and really trying to really fit kind of intermediate puzzle pieces together. So Jacob Markstrom with Calgary, they have the cap space. They feel like that they are closer to maybe being a deeper cup run team. So for Jacob Markstrom with the term and the money they're going to offer him, that made sense to me. For Vancouver, you have contracts coming up that you're going to have to pay big money for. Elias Pettersson is one. Thatcher Demko, who kind of came out of nowhere to kind of really steal, if not, a Stanley Cup series back this season. And also you have Brock Besser, who basically took a bridge deal. So with Vancouver, you had some solace in the fact that you had a strong, basically 1B goaltender in Thatcher Demko, where it sucks to lose Jacob Markstrom, but you're going to save some money, and you have a very capable goaltender in Thatcher Demko there as well. So Braden Holtby will probably be the day one starter, but you have to feel pretty good that if he is not healthy or just not playing well, Thatcher Demko could come in and save the day. So for Vancouver, to me, that's good and bad for that organization today.
Yeah, I thought the Braden Holtby, that, speaking of that contract, I thought 2 years was a bit interesting. I figured he'd be looking for maybe something a little bit longer, maybe in the 3-4 year range. So it was kind of interesting. It's almost a prove it to me contract for a guy that really hasn't proven it to the NHL world as of late. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought, speaking of term, Anton Khudobin, I think he earned his 3 years, but 3 years for a guy who's getting up there in age, that extra year might come back to bite you. Matt Murray, 4 years. I don't know. I know the Ottawa Senators, obviously in a big transition, can use a goaltender like Matt Murray, to see if he can reinvigorate his game without a good defensive core in front of him right now. But 4 years, that's a big experiment with that kind of price tag. So for me, I guess the term probably shocked me on a lot of those, Nick. I don't know.
Well, I'll give you my opinion. First of all, I don't think it's a prove-it-to-me contract with Braden Holtby in Vancouver. Right now, teams, because of the flat cap, they're very scared to go longer than the flat cap is allowing them to. So, and honestly, if I'm a player, I don't want to go past the cap either, because to me, it's almost like a bridge contract for the next couple of years, because if they do get this new broadcast deal, you're going to inject some cash into the owners. Now you can renegotiate that contract and possibly get your money's worth then. So it is kind of a holding period. I don't think, as you described it, it is kind of a prove-it-to-me contract. It's a weather the storm type contract. With Khudobin, I don't think there's as much risk there as you think. Number one, I think the bigger risk is with Ben Bishop. He's proven throughout his career, both here in Dallas as well as in Tampa, he's had some health issues and staying healthy. For Khudobin, yes, it's maybe more of an expensive backup than you'd like, but as we saw, Ben Bishop paid one game in the entire playoff term here for the Dallas Stars. So to me, it was a necessary insurance contract, and if Ben Bishop can't get healthy, he maybe becomes a buyout option. You have a security and a 3-year contract with Khudobin. And then with the Senators, yes, they're making some transition this year. The last couple of seasons, they've been really kind of stocking up on their first-round picks, getting some young players. Now they're starting to add some of those veteran pieces in there. This team could turn it around, but as I agree with you, for Matt Murray, $6.25 million for the next 4 years, I think that's a good, solid contract for a goaltender that, yes, as you mentioned, is probably looking to reinvigorate, get a fresh start. But he's got a young defensive core in front of him, and he's going to have to step up big for this team to take any step forward in the Eastern Conference. They might surprise some people, but again, there's still a very young team up there in the depths of Ottawa, Ontario.
Yeah, I got to believe Thomas Greiss and Corey Crawford are the two biggest names left in that goaltender market, as well as Marc-Andre Fleury, if he does indeed end up being traded. Of course, he's not a UFA at this current point in time, but those are the three that I would definitely want to keep an eye on.
Speaking of Marc-Andre Fleury, no, not to cut you off, sorry, but one thing that people are forgetting about Marc-Andre Fleury and the Vegas Golden Knights, they're looking for a trade partner that they does not want to retain any salary. So this is something that I had mentioned to you before as a caution, that it's not that the goaltender people don't want, but people don't want to acquire his price tag right now. So Vegas, to me, I think is stuck with Marc-Andre Fleury. The only way that he gets traded now at this point, if Vegas is going to be sellers at the deadline for next season, honestly. I don't think he's really going to go anywhere. Everybody's up against the flat cap. I just don't see any team having really the cap space to really take him anywhere. And Vegas has already said very publicly they're not going to retain any salary in a transaction for Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, very interesting. I think if you're Vegas, I think you got to find a team that's willing to overpay a little bit, that has you retaining some salary, but nothing egregious. It's going to be compromise on both sides, but nonetheless, Marc-Andre Fleury, I think he's got a few years left in the tank, and it should be interesting to see if he does end up in Vegas. I mean, that's not a bad 1-2 tandem with Robin Lehner and Marc-Andre Fleury once again. Moving into some player free agent signings, not that goalies aren't players, but they're not outskaters. Of course, as you mentioned, the biggest name on this list, Nick, Johnny Brodzinski, of course, signing with the New York Rangers, 1 year, reportedly $700,000, but, not quite sure yet on that one. And the newest one here, of course, we're recording just before 7:30 on Friday night. TJ Brodie just signed about an hour ago with the Toronto Maple Leafs, 4 years, $5 million average annual value. Kevin Shattenkirk headed off to Anaheim, 3 years, $3.9 million average annual value. Really like that deal for the Anaheim Ducks.
It's a steal for Anaheim.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Jack Johnson, New York Rangers, 1 year, $1 million. There's a cheap signing for a group looking for a sixth defenseman. Kyle Turris, a guy whose game has really dropped off in the past couple of years. Edmonton Oilers picked him up at 2 years, $1.65 million average annual value. I don't know about you, Nick, but I would say that anybody playing with Connor McDavid is bound to get a little bit better, as well as Tyler Ennis signing with the Edmonton Oilers, 1 year, $1 million. Out of this kind of group here, Nick, I'd say Tyler Ennis, honestly, is a guy that, for what they paid for him, is a guy that really has the potential to continue to contribute up there in Edmonton. That one and the Kevin Shattenkirk signing, to me, are two big ones so far for deals.
Sure. I'll even throw in TJ Brodie for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Kyle Dubas has made it very clear with not only his drafting, but also with his free agent and trades that he wants to win with offense. Now, the problem is, as we've seen, he's got a glaring hole in his defense. TJ Brodie isn't going to solve that for you per se, but it's certainly better than nothing in what they've done. You need somebody to complement Morgan Riley. To me, they still have a lack of depth on their blue line, especially in the second and third pairings. But it's something, and it's a decent value for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who still continue to try to work around some very expensive forwards that they have signed to long-term deals. So that, to me, I think is going to be a very underrated signing as we head into next season. Kyle Turris, to me, is actually more the interesting one. It just didn't seem like, 2 years ago when he went to Nashville, he was a rock star, right? Some changes kept being made. He just didn't seem to have the chemistry and didn't seem to have that drive with Nashville. I think his career is going to be reinvigorated up in Edmonton. I don't think he slots in with Connor McDavid. You're not going to break up him and Leon Draisaitl, but being probably a second line player, I think he's going to see some pretty good ice time, and with a team that certainly sees some of that clock ticking with Connor McDavid. Going forward, they want to make sure they can try to build for another deep playoff run up there in the snowy Alberta mountains, as they say.
Yeah, glad you mentioned Canada, and specifically the Toronto Maple Leafs picking up Wayne Simmons on a 1 year, $1.5 million deal. Good cheap signing for a guy with potentially a lot of upside still there. Tyler Mott re-upped with the Vancouver Canucks at 2 years, $1.225 average annual value. I really like Tyler Mott's game. He's a speedster and a very underrated hockey player. Of course, originally with the Chicago Blackhawks, but has spent the past couple of years in a Canucks uniform.
Good depth player for Vancouver.
Yeah, definitely. Bobby Ryan, a guy that we expected to get another contract. We talked about I believe it was either last episode or the episode before. He went out to Detroit in a 1 year, $1 million contract. Pretty much exactly what we had expected to end up for him. John Merrill, Detroit as well, 1 year, $925,000. So Detroit making some moves with Stevie Yzerman as the helm, who, of course, Stevie Y pretty much had his fingerprints all over that Tampa Bay Stanley Cup win down south. So, and a team that actually made a lot of moves down south is the Florida Panthers too. Alexander Venberg, who was bought out by the Columbus Blue Jackets, signed with Florida for 1 year at $2.25 million. He's actually getting paid a pretty darn decent amount right now with that buyout. Radko Gudas also went down to the Sunshine State, 3 years, $2.5 million average annual value, as well as Connor Verhaeghe, 2 years, $1 million. Speaking of Florida staying in the state, the Tampa Bay Lightning had a couple of contracts. Patrick Maroon and Luke Schenn, 3 years between the two of them, 2 for Patrick and 1 for Luke Schenn, both under $1 million each. Moving up to Washington, Justin Schultz, kind of a bigger name there. Penguins didn't re-up his contract, 2 years at $4 million. That's kind of a deadly little deal, I would say, for Washington, with a guy who's going to be interdivision rivals with Pittsburgh and kind of ticked off that he doesn't get to play for him. That's a good signing there. And running through the last quick little list here, Luke Schenn, like we mentioned, with Tampa Bay, and then Mark Borowiecki with the Nashville Predators at 2 years, $2 million average annual value. Nathan Beaulieu in Winnipeg at 2 years. Dominic Kubelik and Malcolm Subban both re-signed with the Hawks. Kubelik at $3.7 million average annual value. That's a heck of a signing. He's a heck of a player. Had a good campaign last year for the Hawks. And then Tyler Pitlick, the last one on this list, with the Arizona Coyotes at 2 years and $1.75 million. And some guys that are kind of, Nick, before we get your thoughts here, I know I'm rambling on, but some guys still left on the market here as far as free agents are concerned. Taylor Hall is pretty much the big name out there. He's getting ready to hold court with the Columbus Blue Jackets tomorrow. It kind of sounds like Columbus might be the front runner just in terms of the fact that they do have some cap space and opportunity to get him signed. Tyler Johnson is on regular waivers right now with a 7 to 8 team list that he's been working with the team. He's got 4 years left at $5 million average annual value.
He's going to get bought out by Tampa.
Yeah, very interesting there to see where the 30-year-old sniper goes. Alex Pietrangela's back in talks with the Blues. They're supposed to offer him something else tomorrow on Saturday. If he doesn't stay in St. Louis, Vegas, Toronto kind of seem like the front runners, and Florida and Vancouver and Edmonton have also expressed some interest, but they're kind of long shots. He can't sign an 8-year deal with his hometown club anymore, as that opportunity expired at midnight last night, I believe.
Correct.
Oliver Ekman-Larsson will not be traded. The Coyotes' ask was too high for both Vancouver and Boston, so OEL will stay in the desert. Patrick Marleau most likely returns to the Sharks on a cheap 1-year deal like last year. And lastly, Andy Green, Derek Brassard, and Matt Martin will also test free agency for the New York Islanders in a bit of a shakeup for Lou Lamoriello, Barry Trotz, and company. Holy smokes, Nick, that was a lot. Looking back on this list, to be honest with you, I don't know. Florida, I feel like that Alexander Venberg contract, it's not really an overpay, but still, that's for a guy who just got bought out and is getting a hefty price tag. I thought $2.25 million was a little bit steep, not overly. I probably would have went 1.7, 1.8, something like that. But I really like the Dominic Kubalik signing with the Chicago Blackhawks. Out of that second list, Nick, or guys that have left to be signed, is there anything that sticks out to you as being important?
Detroit. And here's why I say that. Stevie Y, there was a quote by Bobby Ryan when he said he was texting with Steve Yzerman about the opportunity that, he could play in Detroit. And he said that, all I had to do was talk to him and I was sold. I didn't have to talk to anybody else. So to me, there's still some contract limitations that Detroit has. But there's no question under the direction of Stevie Y that the Detroit Red Wings, the one time, sort of poster child of the NHL up until a few seasons ago, was a 27 straight playoff appearances for the Red Wings, ended as a 25. Pretty close, right? So you make the playoffs 25 consecutive years, you're doing something right. And Stevie Y is going to get that organization back to being competitive and playoff competitive again. I still think it's going to be 2 more seasons before they really start making strides. They do have some good young core players in Dylan Larkin. Questions of goal still for me a bit, but I think once we get past this flat cap era, he gets some room, he gets some of those old contracts off of his plate. You're going to see Detroit start making noise. And again, with Stevie Y, there's news, he has a reputation around the league, not only both the other general manager, but also the players. Players want to go to where he is as an organization because of just how he treats everybody, how he presents himself. He wants to win. So to me, Detroit there. Going back to the Alexander Wenberg in Florida, Florida is desperate. Honestly, Florida is in overpay mode, and that's exactly what they did with Wenberg. Not by a ton, but Florida definitely fell up short last season. There's no question about that. They brought in some big names thinking that would get them over the hump. It got them to, a qualifying round, but it didn't really get them to a deeper than a first-round playoff push. And right now, the franchise is looking at this as we have to break this cycle. They don't want to go another 10 years just to make a really big flash appearance. They want to be a competitive bunch. They have their coach in Joel Quenneville. They've got their goaltender in Sergei Bobrovsky. They've got a good young core in Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau, Aaron Ekblad. And at the end of the day, they know that unless they do something now, they're going to have to make even bigger roster changes. So to me, Wenberg is them trying to secure some type of a future they think they have with the young forward there.
Of course, Bill Zito used to be with the Columbus Blue Jackets, now, of course, down in Florida. So that might be a familiar signing. And you mentioned Florida as well. Mike Hoffman has the most goals of any UFA that's on the market right now at 29 last season. So that'll be interesting. And when you mentioned Detroit and Stevie Y, I don't know, man. I just keep getting chills every time I think about Stevie Y. That slap shot, that camera angle behind the net against the St. Louis Blues, gives me goosebumps. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they're a group, with Thomas Greiss or Corey Crawford, a signing like that could really change the complexion of that organization, somewhat quickly. So should be interesting. As some other notable restricted free agents here, as you kind of helped us discern the difference between RFAs and UFAs. Anthony Duclair was not re-upped by the Ottawa Senators. Thought that one was a little bit interesting. Dominic Cahoon, Nick Cousins, Travis Boyd, Andreas Athanasiou was another interesting one. Speaking of former Detroit Red Wings, Vinny Hinostroza, another interesting one too. Slater Cuckoo, Matt Benning, and Troy Stetcher all looking for new deals, either with their old clubs or potentially their new clubs here. Nick, any names stick out to you on that list?
Not really. I think all but one could have a potential to re-sign with their club. The one name to me that really doesn't is Troy Stetcher. You watched him with Vancouver. He did seem kind of fall out of favor with Travis Green in the Canucks throughout the playoffs. To me, he's a guy that's maybe a little bit undersized to be, kind of in the Western Conference on the blue line. They have, again, Quinn Hughes. You've got supposedly Brandon Tanev coming back. To me, there's just the way that Vancouver wants to play. I don't think Troy Stetcher can play that way. He was up muscled quite a bit of times in the first and the second rounds here with Vancouver. So to me, Troy Stetcher, I think, lands an NHL job. But to me, he's more of an East Coast or an Eastern Conference type defenseman, more of that puck possession skating type rather than the bruising Western Conference Canadian style of defenseman. So to me, he gets a contract, but it's not going to be with Vancouver.
Yeah, well, his first problem is he played for the University of North Dakota, so of course he saw it. Troy Stetcher, obviously hoping that he does get a contract. We love seeing guys get their payday and be able to play a little bit of puck professionally. It's just hopefully we wish the best for him on that one, Nick. But I don't know, man. Something about these North Dakota players, I tell you. Actually, North Dakota players and the Ottawa Senators, you talk about some draft picks that the Ottawa Senators had. They love the University of North Dakota. But moving on to our last, I know you want to speak on that, but we do gotta get rolling. I hate to be that guy. I know it's your birthday. I'm sorry, man.
Good, dude.
But we're going to move on to our last little bit here in the Center Ice View news and notes, and that's the trade action that's happened since October 2nd in the NHL. We did you the favor of taking out the pick-for-pick trades in the NHL draft because I don't think anyone needs to hear about those ones. So we're going to start with the Ottawa Senators acquiring defenseman Joshua Brown from the Florida Panthers for a fourth-round pick in this year's draft. That one's probably the least notable signing on this list. October 4th, LA Kings acquired Olli Maatta from the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for forward Brad Morrison. I saw a pretty funny thing in one of the comments on the score that said Olli Maatta is essentially a dumpster fire with small concrete tire boots. I don't know. That was Olli Maatta's a guy for me that he has so much upside, but he just cannot find a way to unlock that fifth gear for whatever reason. Would that be a fair assessment to you?
Yeah, but he's a defenseman, where the type of game that he plays, he needs to be able to have someone kind of be more of that defensive defenseman. He's the guy that loves to skate around. He likes to create a little bit. And to me, when he doesn't feel like he's got that freedom, he panics. So to me, Los Angeles could be a good fit where maybe he gets some more freedom offensively in the Los Angeles Kings style. But again, new face, new opportunity for Olli Maatta. See what happens.
Yeah. October 5th was a big day for the Minnesota Wild. They traded a pair of players in that deal. We're going to touch on that one after our Healthy Scratch interview segment. Moving into October 6th, the Columbus Blue Jackets acquired Max Domi and a third-round pick from Montreal in exchange for forward Josh Anderson, who Josh Anderson just re-upped for 7 years, man. This was probably arguably the biggest trade I would say that we've seen thus far potentially. Nick, I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you. Not so much the acquisition of Josh Anderson, in favor versus Max Domi, but the fact that they gave him such big term right out of the gate. I mean, you think about a guy like Josh Anderson, you think about a guy like Max Domi. I mean, the difference there isn't, it's not like they traded Max Domi for Artemi Panarin. You know what I mean? The difference was not that astronomical for me. So I don't know, Nick, what are your thoughts here? And is Max Domi a good fit for the Blue Jackets?
He's exactly the type of player that John Tortorella is going to love. He's a scrappy player. He has offensive skill. He can put the puck in the net. But more importantly, he's a scrappy guy. He's a guy that works hard. He's not afraid to be physical. John Tortorella likes his bulldog-type players on his squad. Now, for Josh Anderson, I agree. For Montreal, in this cap-type situation, to give him 7 years, it could be either one, very dumb, or it can be two, incredibly brilliant. Because remember, NHL contracts, unlike NFL contracts, you cannot restructure them. Was it 7 years? Was it 4 something for Anderson in there in Columbus there, Noah?
Yeah, I'd have to take a look. I don't have the contract, but I mean, it was an interesting payday for a guy that, he's proven his stuff, but not to the potential that a 7-year contract warrants. But when you talk about, flat cap or no flat cap, if he ends up becoming the player at only age 26 that the Montreal Canadiens want him to be, that contract is going to look really good at age 29 and 30. I mean, that's, and I can't remember if there was a no move clause attached to it. Our friend Derek Felksa would be all over this one, loves his no move clauses. But yeah, I mean, it's a great signing for Montreal if it pans out. I know that sounds like, well, duh, obviously, but
there's the risk, like we said, right? There's the risk where if he doesn't, that's a very unmovable asset, especially in the next 2, if not 3, maybe even as long as 4 years. But like you said, if he pans out and becomes a star, well, you're locking him in to a 7-year deal where, honestly, again, you're guaranteeing minimal money for him. So again, this is a very high risk, high reward type contract for Montreal, and it's going to look either really good or really bad, and we'll know in a couple of years in.
Yeah, and a couple more trades moving in from October 7th to the 9th. The Florida Panthers, of course, were added again, as were the Ottawa Senators. As we mentioned, Matt Murray traded in that trade on October 7th for a prospect and a draft pick. The Nashville Predators, of course, acquired Luke Kunin for Nick Bonino, who went to Minnesota. We'll break that one down as well in our next segment. The LA Kings acquired Lias Andersson, a first-round pick from the New York Rangers in exchange for a 2020 second-round pick in this draft, of course, that just happened. Lias Andersson, kind of an interesting character in terms of behavioral issues, and just a guy that has had a really tumultuous ride, in the Broadway blues and kind of been feeling the blues a little bit. A guy who's a very, very good player, but just hasn't panned out in that organization. So kind of interesting to see where that one develops. Nick, we'll get your thoughts on that one in just a second. The Panthers, as we mentioned, were added again. Another Columbus Blue Jacket in Marcus Nudavara heading down to the Sunshine State. Always loved Marcus Nudavara's game, if you ask me. The Senators acquired Eric Goodmanson from the Ducks. The Devils acquired Ryan Murray, a former Columbus Blue Jacket, now with the Devils, for a 2021 fifth-round pick in next year's draft. And lastly, the only trade that happened today, Winnipeg reacquired Paul Stastny from the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for defenseman Carl Dahlstrom, a 2022 conditional fourth-round pick. Kind of cool to see Stastny go back and potentially have success again with the Jets. I don't know, his first stint there was kind of interesting, but that signing, or that trade, I should say, today, and the Lias Andersson one, for me, were the two that stuck out. Nick, I mean, what are your thoughts on Lias Andersson and a guy that's really got a lot of upside, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of Josh Hosang, where he's got a lot of the off-ice issues that really need to be remedied by the LA Kings?
Well, it also shows you why Mike Hoffman isn't signing. When you have 29 goals and you're an unrestricted free agent and you're not getting – a contract here on the first day of free agency, that tells you something about what teams are valuing with character off the ice, right? NHL locker rooms, you and I know have been inside hockey locker rooms, it's a tight-knit group. And the last thing you want to do is stick a grenade in that locker room, no matter how skilled that grenade is, and blow up and cause friction within a locker room. Remember, Mike Hoffman was traded from the Senators to San Jose on the same day they flipped him, San Jose, to the Florida Panthers. General managers talk, players talk. We know what kind of impact a player with some off-ice and mental issues can have. Now, we're not here to judge, right? We don't know what all is happening behind the scenes, but we've seen lately that general managers and teams are not willing to risk their team cohesion with a guy who could be a 20, if not almost 30 goal scorer in Mike Hoffman on their roster. To me, it would not surprise me if Mike Hoffman does not get a contract right away. And if he does, to me, it's going to be very, very low money value. And to me, he's going to be a guy that probably is going to be a healthy scratch, quite a bit of the time. It's the same thing with Joshua Hosling and Lias Andersson. There's just a big time push right now to keep that chemistry alive and to keep the positivity going around. You don't want somebody in there. It only takes one bag to ruin the whole basket. So I'm not surprised by it. It's unfortunate because, again, we don't know of all the story that's happening behind the scenes. But again, you're seeing the general managers really trying to protect their team as a whole, even at the expense of what could be a very large point producer that's all out there in the open market.
Well, one place Mike Hoffman isn't going is the San Jose Sharks. He will not be reunited with Erik Karlsson, speaking of some behavioral issues. But a guy who was on his decent behavior for us this week, Nick, was one of our pals up in the press box, Jim Erickson, current radio analyst for the St. Cloud State Huskies with Learfield on 96.7 The River. man, this one was one heck of an interview, and he's just an absolute blast to be around. He's got that, that iconic deep radio voice, and I don't know, Nick, I think it's the first time we've ever had a guest that has had better audio than we have. So, Nick, anything you want to add for the fans before we jump onto this one?
He's a pro. Jim Erickson, as far as my development as a broadcaster, again, for those, we've said it before, he sits just to our right. Literally, he's the next seat next to us for KVSC and for 96.7 The River at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. Extremely incredible human being, very open. You can conversate with him before the games. He shares notes, he shares insights. Not only to broadcasting, but on some of the notes that he takes, he's incredibly meticulous in his notes. He'll touch on that here in the interview, but all around great guy, and we were very, very honored and happy to have him on the podcast this week.
Yeah, it's definitely been a long time coming, and we're not going to keep you waiting any longer. So without further ado, Mr. Jim Erickson.
With a new guest joining every week, it's a lineup chock full of players, coaches, fans, and more. This week's special guest is the Healthy Scratch.
And welcome back to the Den Husky Warming House Podcast, fans. We have a very special guest for our Healthy Scratch interview segment. You know him as the radio voice of St. Cloud State men's hockey. Jim Erickson is joining us today. And Jim, what a treat it is to have you on the show. Thanks again for joining this evening, Jim. Nice to be with you.
Noah, Nick, this is just an absolute thrill. People get to see my face. I'm a radio guy. So to actually be on a camera, even though it's a Windows 10-year-old laptop that I'm on, might be a little grainy. The resolution might not be as good as you guys are used to, but we'll do our best here from Wright County, Minnesota, Otsego, on the shores of the Mississippi River.
Sound cool.
The one thing he's got going for us, Noah, is he's beating us on the audio quality. So we might have to take some directions there from the old pro there as a Jim Erickson. So definitely good to have you.
Thank you. I'll send you the specs of my audio processor that I have down here. Also,
anything to make me sound greater, that'd be great.
I have a popcorn maker, a panini grill, and one of those George Foremans here in my studio. So we're good to go.
I think the only thing you're missing is the tap handle for some beer, man. That's really the thing you're only missing.
This is where I quarantine, right here.
Oh,
shelter in place. Where do you want to stay? Do you want to stay in the garage? Do you want to stay in the kitchen? Where do you want to stay? I said my radio studio. So here we are, ready to go.
No, I think Noah will let you have the first question. It sounds like you're eager to get yourself involved here into the conversation, so I'll let you have the first one for good old Jim.
I don't know if I can keep up here. I know we have Jim beat in one area of expertise, and that's we have better faces for radio than he does. So, I mean, that's
true.
So what is that? A better face? Does that mean you have a worst face then? Your face is, if you have a better face for radio, that is actually lower on the scale then, right? Is that what you're saying, Noah?
Exactly. Self-deprecating humor all day. We don't know what we're doing. We like to pretend, though. A guy that does know what he's doing, though, of course, is you, Jim. 30 years in sports broadcasting, pretty much. But my first experience with you was a little bit different, shall we say. When I moved to St. Cloud last year, I believe I contacted you via LinkedIn potentially, and I think I asked you if you had any room on your broadcast for any sort of St. Cloud. Do you happen to remember that conversation?
Yes.
Or you just kind of like, what the hell who is this?
It was, hey, you don't know unless you ask. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, yeah, exactly. Why don't you email the governor and ask him if he needs help on one of his conference committees or something like that? I mean, just, reach out, go for the stars, reach for the stars. And that's what you did. And, I appreciated that. I'm glad you were able to find a place here and be able to do what you're doing. You guys are doing a great job. I mean, with the coverage and everything, and your podcast is outstanding. So I do remember that, Noah, and it was an interesting start to our relationship. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, super appreciative, obviously, of you being cordial with that process. Your start actually was a little bit unique in its own right. I believe, weren't you like 20 years old when you became a sports director out in Pine City? Kind of got your start and jumped into hockey, trying to mimic the likes of Bob Kurtz and Al Shaver on the radio. I mean, can you take us through your early years of your career and kind of where you got started? Eventually becoming the iconic voice of Huskies hockey.
I grew up in little Bram, Minnesota, which is basically due east of St. Cloud between Mora and Cambridge, and small town, less than 1,000 when I lived there, and we were out in the country, some 7, 8, 9 miles out of town. So we were a farm. I was a farm kid, grew up on a farm, had farm animals, and did all that until about 1980, till I was 10 or so, and then farming economy changed, and we got out of farming. But so grew up in a small town. Always wanted to be a broadcaster. Always wanted to be in broadcasting. Got a chance in high school, was injured, so I couldn't play sports. So I started doing PA and started broadcasting play-by-play for volleyball and putting them on the old VHS tapes. And then they would put them on cable access locally. So became kind of a small little celebrity there as a 10th grader in high school. So got going that way and did some, announcing just at the school, and a lot of DJ dances and air bands. You guys even know what air bands are? Do you know what those are, Nick and Noah?
Nick does. He's like prime air band material.
Yeah.
Well,
air
totally.
band
Well, I'm surprised, Noah, you know what a VHS tape is, honestly. I mean,
I still remember dial-up internet. We had dial-up internet until I was 9, but that's because I live in North Dakota, so that might be cheating a little bit.
Can you mimic?
Cheating.
Can you either of you mimic the sound of dial-up internet?
You know what's actually funny? I can't, but we actually included it in our last apparel giveaway. It was the opener apparel giveaway today.
Oh.
Of course, we're on Wednesday, October 7th, but it's pretty much, what is it like?
That's pretty good. That's very good, in fact. Yeah.
You know what? I was going to take over as the voiceover talent here, but you know what? You took it away from me, so it's all you. I'll leave it at that.
No, we had air bands. I DJ'd air band dances, and air bands were where the kids, the students, would get together with classmates, and they would sign up. They'd be Bon Jovi, they'd be Heart, any of those groups from the Violent Femmes, any of those groups from the 80s and before, and they would dress up as these artists, and we would set up a stage. We'd have speakers and everything, and they would lip sync and play air guitar, or they'd bring real guitars and not play them, or we would take the actual drum set from the band room, and then they would put those big pads that we used on the floor polisher that they polished the floor in the school. They would take them and then tape those on the top of the drums, so the drummers could actually kind of hit the drums with the drumsticks, and it wouldn't make a noise because it is air band. You can't make any noise. And I was the guy DJing and mixing the tapes and things like that, and doing the hosting and the emceeing. So it was fun. And growing up in a small school like that, it gave me an opportunity, because there were a lot of opportunities, and just run with it, do whatever you want with it. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great experience. So I went from there to Brown Institute, and famed broadcasting school that no longer exists, but very well known, going all the way back, I think, to the 50s and the 40s, if not even before that, in Minneapolis. And then luckily got a job while I was still in school at WCMP Radio, which was Pine City, which was basically in my local area. I grew up maybe 15 minutes away from the station, so I could live at home for the first few years before we sold our farm, and could drive back and forth. And I was working part-time, and then before I knew it, the opportunity arose that they needed a sports director in maybe March of 1990. I was barely 20 years old, and took off running from there, and just did as many games as I could possibly do. They pretty much had a good sponsorship base, a lot of what we called sports boosters, and they basically allowed me to do as many games as I wanted to. So there would be winter seasons where I could cram maybe 100 games in of the local high school teams, boys and girls basketball, boys and girls hockey. So it was kind of fun. And kind of interesting story. I didn't start doing hockey right away. I was not a hockey broadcaster right away. Basketball was my sport. Growing up in Bram, we were not a hockey town. We didn't have a hockey team. We were a basketball town. And I'd like to take claim as manager of the basketball team that I was able to set the standard for those 3 straight state championships that they did later in the 2000s. I don't know if anything. I was there when the coach that won those championships, Bob Vaughn, it was his first year. So somebody had to guide him through that first year. So I'd like to take some credit for that. But anyway, so basketball was my sport, and I was kind of nervous to do hockey but we had to do hockey. And my first ever hockey game, I started that job in 1990. I didn't do my first hockey game until maybe 1992. And I was nervous. And I just, think about that. When you start at a small radio station, you can just go out. You don't have to worry about, people obviously might give you a hard time or might give you a bad critique or whatever. But it's an opportunity to go out there on a small stage and test things out. Give yourself a chance to see what it might be like. And I'd never done hockey. I basically just channeled Bob Kurtz, who I'd watched on TV for so many years, Doug McLeod, Al Shaver, those guys, the guys that I had been exposed to as a fan of the North Stars and so forth when I was a kid. So basically did that and just kind of found my way through and enjoyed the process and found out that was my favorite sport eventually. I think the first game I ever did was Mora versus Pine City. Yeah. Mora Hinckley Finlayson versus Pine City Rush City, probably at the Mora Civic Center is probably the first game I ever did.
Jim, hockey is a uniquely fast-moving sport. And you talk about basketball and how you have breaks here and there, and sometimes depending on where it's at in the quarter or the half, sometimes the action's slow. Do you recall your first game and how much knowledge you had of the game prior? And, I think as a young broadcaster, I know that for myself and for Noah, speaking, retrospectively, with going into broadcasting and trying to find your first gig, you're always trying to make that impression. I guess, how did you handle the criticism, and, what were some of the ththings you learned as you started broadcasting hockey?
I think I had been there for a couple of years, so I had established a pretty good reputation. People there, I didn't get many negative comments at all. People were really complimentary, and I was a local kid from Bram, so I got a lot of attention from my hometown and kind of like the whole, big fish in a small pond kind of thing. So, I had a little bit of confidence there and I don't want to say ego, but, some confidence there with how the people had reacted to me calling games when I first started doing it for the last couple of years. And I listened to my games from then, and I don't think I'm that good, really. When you go back and listen to your old games, you at that time you thought, man, I'm good. I'm ready for network. And, you're 21, 22 years old, and now you go back and listen to them and you go, oh my goodness, that's almost unlistenable. But, it's part of the process, and, you get better over the years. And I can remember that first game, and when I first started doing hockey, I didn't know what forecheck or backcheck was. And the coach kind of helped me. His name is Dan Voce. He's now, I think, the superintendent of the Mora schools, but he was the head coach at Pine City. And, working with those coaches, I learned those things. I said, hey, I got to learn these things. I got to learn half wall. I got to learn, all these other things that I don't really know of or can remember or soaked in from like North Star broadcasts and things like that. I did not play hockey growing up. We weren't a hockey school, as I said. So it was more from being a big fan of the North Stars and watching every North Star game that was ever broadcast on television. And where I grew up, AM 1500, which was the affiliate of the North Stars, they did not come in very well north of the Twin Cities. You get an hour and a half north of the Twin Cities. It was not always able. We weren't always able to get KSDP AM 1500 in. So a lot of my exposure to hockey was simply just North Star games with Bob Kurtz and Tom Reed calling the games in the late 70s and early 80s. So I picked up a lot of Bob's mannerisms, teaser up, and some of the other things that he does, and I brought those into my call. So it was a lot of fun, and I wish I had a tape of that first game. I wish I did. I wish I would have saved it. Those things. You just wish you would have had that cassette and saved it for prosperity later on.
Jim Erickson, pretty much the new Doc Emmerich, I guess I would say. Never played hockey, but learning the of the game a little bit. Also, shout out to Pine City as well with Drew Steele, of course, senior at KVSC and the sports director there. Shout out little local connection there as well. Kind of interesting to think about. Jim Erickson and, of course, your color analyst Dave Reichel both kind of started around the same time in 1992. So it's a funny world, how small the hockey world is. But, your hockey experience and, of course, your radio experience took you to KLCI in the Twin Cities. And then, of course, ending up, with the Memphis River Kings and the Iowa Stars, the Dallas Stars AHL affiliate through that time span through about 2008. Can you kind of walk us through that time period too, and how important it was for you, not only when you were working with the Memphis River Kings for on-air purposes, you also were media relations director too.
Mm-hmm.
Is it for young broadcasters to understand that, hey, I want to do hockey play-by-play, but I also have to do the news, I also have to know how to DJ the late night radio show, all those little things, and what your journey, of course, was like through that time?
Yeah, when I worked at radio stations, which was the Pine City station, and also KLCI, WQPM, Bob FM, which I'm still at now, although I left there and then came back 5 years later in 2009 to go work minor league hockey. Yeah, I mean, when you work at small radio and, like any real radio station, whether you're in St. Cloud or wherever, you get to do a lot of things. You get to do the morning show. You get to read news. I read obituaries. I read lost dogs. I read people who were selling their chickens on our Time to Trade show, those kind of things. So it was, you get to experience those things. Those are different things more than just sports. So you get a well-rounded background, well-rounded education, and experience moving ahead. But I was hungry for more. I love doing the high school sports, local high school sports, coaches shows, morning shows, those kind of things. But I wanted to do play-by-play. I wanted to be a play-by-play person with the goal of being and getting as high as I possibly could get, as far as professionally. So I moved from Pine City to Princeton, which was a little bit of, it wasn't a lateral move. It moved up a little bit because I knew their FM was starting to creep into the Twin Cities and starting to make some inroads in country music in the Twin Cities market. So I moved there. I met some people there. I met a man by the name of Tom Witchin, who many Husky fans might remember. He called Husky hockey for many, many years on the radio and has done Augsburg and all these other schools and MIAC games in the Twin Cities for years. I met him through Princeton, through a connection there. And through him, I was able to start doing Gopher women's hockey. I did Gopher women's hockey for a few years. And that then led to my interest in going to, I want to pursue more hockey. Actually, I wanted to be a baseball. Baseball is what I wanted to do first. I wanted to do minor league. I sent out tapes and resumes to like almost every AA and AAA team out there in baseball. It was just so competitive. I had a couple of interviews. It was just so competitive. I said, I'd been doing the Gopher women's hockey team. That's high-end hockey, national champion contender every year. I said, I'm going to try for hockey. Maybe it'll be a path of least resistance. There won't be as much interest. There won't be as much demand, and it won't be as competitive to get in. So I signed up for one of those online sports job boards. You pay $25, you get these job leads that come, kind of like STAA now, but different. I think it was workinsports.com or something like that. And I saw it was a stealth job posting. I didn't even know where it was from, but they said minor league hockey, da. So I sent my stuff in, and they give me a call back. Still didn't tell me where they were from. And I had to look and just left a message with a phone number. And I had to look up the area code to find out where that team was from. Well, this team is interested in me, where are they from? And I got a Mississippi area code. And I looked for Mississippi hockey teams. And the first one that came up was the Tupelo T-Rex. And I saw, well, they're defunct. And I never did see the Mississippi or Memphis River Kings. So I didn't even know they were the ones interested. And talked to them. Their season had already begun. Their guy had to leave or got fired. I can't remember what it was. But the season was already underway. I was calling high school football. It was October of 2004. And I wanted to go down and get into minor league hockey. And it was the best decision that I'd ever made, because it got me to do something different. It got me out of my little bubble here in the home area, got me to experience something out of state and professional hockey, being the voice of a team, which is what I wanted to do as well. So it was a great experience for 3 years. And of course, calling hockey in Southern United States and the deep South or the mid-South, Mississippi, Memphis area, it certainly was different. It was fun.
What was the fan interest like? We talk about college hockey in a sense, and what's the next endeavor for this game. And there's been a recent conversation about Division I and the SEC, because we all know the SEC is going to own football.
Right.
But if college hockey can make its way south and get Division I, we're talking about not just saving a program like Alabama Huntsville. We're talking about the ultimate goal of growing the game. So what was the fan interest like? What was the conversations around hockey, down there in Memphis and as well as Louisiana down south?
There were some transplants. I met a number of people that, again, some that were from Minnesota that were transplants, that were hockey fans, but also there were the locals that became hockey fans. They loved the action. Of course, at that level, AA, minor league hockey, a few more fights. And whether you thought that was good or bad for the game, it was something that people were interested in and brought people, out of their seats and sometimes brought them to the game. There were some teams in our league that would have guaranteed fight night. They would tell their guy, we got to have at least one fight tonight because we're guaranteeing our fans a fight. So it was guaranteed fight night. I think that was the Wichita Thunder that used to do that. But the fans, the only thing is you had to be more educational. And I think that was fun about the broadcast too. You need to be more educational. When you said it was icing, you had to tell people why it was icing, or, offsides, why was it offsides? You had to go a little bit deeper, a little more on the educational side of things, because you can't assume that even in this market, sometimes you can't always assume that all the listeners know everything, know every intricacy, know every little tidbit and things like that. But at that level, we had what was called Hockey 101, where you would have discussions with the coach or whoever. You bring somebody in, or we do it up on the Jumbotron, or you put it on the website, just the basic hockey information, something that, the people down there didn't grow up taking their kids to hockey, didn't grow up with hockey in their lives. So they needed to be, needed to learn, needed to be educated about the team and about the game. And they were passionate fans. They were as passionate as anybody else, and maybe even more here. They were just with blinders on too. They weren't, like they weren't your fair weather fans either. They loved the team, win or lose, down the South. And you mentioned the SEC. Ole Miss had a team. They would come over to our arena in South Haven, Mississippi, and they would play. Obviously, it wasn't Division I, but they had a team. And other schools like that have teams. Oklahoma has a team. They have teams. Those schools have teams. So there are hockey programs at those schools, and just be a matter of getting to the point where they can make that jump to the next level. But hockey in the South, it was something to experience. And of course, now we've seen the NHL, border to border, north, south, east, or west now in the U.S.
Funny, small world again, Nick. I have two friends that play for the Oklahoma team that you just mentioned, the school out there as well. So funny the way the world worked. Of course, you were hired at St. Cloud State in 2016, taking over for former Minnesota Wild announcer Dan Terhar. But before that, I think people know you for a more iconic role in a game where you probably don't have to explain a lot of the intricacies of hockey. The Minnesota High School State Tournament, you've been there for, what would it be, 7 years now, 8 years? Is that correct?
I did my first football games for Channel 45 in 2010, and then I think I did the first hockey games in 2012. I'd have to look back. I don't know what my bio says, but the 2012, I think, were my first hockey games when I first started doing Class A, and then that led to doing Double A later on as well, after the year that Gary Thorne came to town. So, yeah, it has just been a thrill. I'm glad you brought that up, because it is such an event. It is such a thrill to be a part of that, and you don't realize how many people watch it and how big it is to people around the state until you're involved and you hear from all these people that watch the game. And I remember those first few years I did it, I didn't realize, people that I wouldn't even think that were interested in high school hockey are watching these games and getting invested, and they might not even have a dog in the race. They don't have a team from their town, but they're just there to watch it because it is the event of the high school sports season, along with the other tournaments. But that high school hockey tournament is just something, and to be able to be the voice of it on television is, if I can go back and think of myself when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, watching that tournament on TV, and hearing Wally Shaver and some of those other great legends. Of course, Lou Nanne is still doing it now with me, which to think that when I'm watching those games that I would be doing that with Lou Nanne, some 15, 20 years later, whatever it was, just tremendous. It really is when I think about it.
The opportunity at St. Cloud, like we mentioned, comes up in 2016. And it was the first time, I believe, since 2008 or so that you actually got to cover, potentially cover one team and one team, which was something I think that was pretty high on your list. How did that opportunity come about? And, was it a no-brainer decision for you to take that opportunity, or did you have to think about it a little bit?
No, I saw it on STAA, which is a jobs board. You guys are probably familiar with. A lot of the young broadcasters are members, and they help broadcasters find jobs. And there's a job board on there, and it just happened that Learfield is now Learfield IMG College, but Learfield was taking over the broadcast rights and some of the sponsorships and things as a third party coming into St. Cloud. They had done others, including University of Minnesota, for years, but they were taking over St. Cloud and St. Cloud State's broadcast for football, men's and women's basketball, and for hockey. And they were looking to have a broadcaster. They opened it up for interviews, I guess. And I saw the ad, and I go, you know what? It's not that far of a drive for me. This would be a high level of hockey, Division I. I had interviewed for the Gopher play-by-play job in 2001. I remember that well because the call that I got from WCCO, they were coordinating and hiring the broadcaster, was on the same day as 9/11, 2001. So I was home watching, and I got home. In fact, I think I played golf that day, and still can remember the fighter jets flying over the golf course that I was playing at as they were heading to Minneapolis and doing their flyovers on that date. I got home, and there was a voicemail from WCCO, and it was on 9/11. But anyway, so I had kind of thought when I went and did minor league hockey, my thought was to get more experience so I could make that move to Division I, to another higher level, maybe Golden Gophers or wherever. And this was a golden opportunity with St. Cloud State. And it was lucky enough they liked me, interviewed, and talked with Matt Rao, who at the time was the general manager for Learfield. It's Chad Sheets now. And it just sounded like something I wanted to do. Again, like I said, it was an easy drive. I lived in Blaine at the time. Now I'm in Otsego, which is even closer, only 45-minute drive to the front door at Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. And it's worked out, and I've enjoyed my time here going into my fifth year this upcoming season.
Jim, I want to circle back to minor league hockey for a bit because you spent time with the Iowa Stars. The state of Iowa, it's known for its football, it's known for its wrestling, but, kind of under the radar, it's kind of an emerging hockey state. You have, some of the minor in the junior league, such as the Dubuque Buccaneers. You have, again, a whole bunch of crazy development in Des Moines. And I have to ask you, did you ever at one point eat at Zombie Burger, which is pretty close to Wells Fargo Center there in downtown Des Moines? If you have, please tell me.
Oh, man. I remember going to the High Life Lounge. Now, that was a famous spot. That was probably my favorite spot because they had the old-fashioned wood paneling and the old beer signs hanging on the walls. That was probably the place that I went to the most. They had a lot of bars and restaurants. It's called Court Avenue in downtown Des Moines. Very nice. And it's all tied with the Iowa Event Center, which is Wells Fargo Arena in that area there. They got their old Vets Arena. And it's all tied by Skywalk. So you could walk via Skywalk all the way down to downtown, have a little pregame meal, and then head back to the arena for the game. But, Des Moines is a good program, and they've got youth programs there. They've got the Des Moines Buccaneers, the USHL, and then all those other USHL teams that are in Iowa or just across the border. So Iowa's a fun hockey market. They had good fans. When I was down there, I was only down there for 1 year. For the Iowa Stars before they lost their affiliation with the Dallas Stars. And then there wasn't an American Hockey League team there for a while. And then, of course, the Wild came in and are there now. But we always had good crowds. And I think the Iowa Wild are doing pretty well down there now as well. And they had arena football. We had the Barnstormers. That was kind of they were partners in that arena as well. And Wells Fargo Arena, if you guys haven't been down there, is a very, very nice hockey arena. about 16,000. It's perfect for hockey and basketball, and they also host the Iowa State Wrestling Tournament there as well. I got a chance to see that.
Yeah, and then you kind of, when you talk about coming full circle with Iowa, now, of course, the Iowa Wild, like you mentioned, taking residence in the state. When you move up to the big club, of course, Bob Kurtz, one of the radio play-by-play guys for the Minnesota Wild, but there was a plethora of them this year, you being one of them, with Paul Allen, Kevin Fallness, and Joe O'Donnell. You got to do a couple of games with the big club, Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of walk us through, that experience? Because I remember us being up in the press box and, someone had kind of mentioned to us, oh yeah, Jim, he's getting ready in December to call a couple of Minnesota Wild games. And I'm like, okay, bullshit. What is he actually? And
say that on here? I'm a radio guy. I'm used to being governed by the FCC. I don't know if I could ever use that word with a microphone in front of me, Noah. That was impressive, actually. Or will that get edited out in post-production?
We only edit out the big ones. We've only big one.
The big one.
We're not governed by anybody, unfortunately. We're like international waters. I like to say, like radio pirates, but I'm gonna assume you probably up BS on the Minnesota Wild broadcast. But what was that experience like for you?
He's walking it back now, isn't it? Look at his face. He's like,
doing
he can't even believe he did. Yes.
Yeah, it's called tap dancing, smoke and mirrors, and I've perfected it over my career. Noah, you're progressing nicely.
Just see what he's like when he's not on the radio. It's even better. But yeah, but to finish, Noah, your question, right. Getting that call to call an NHL game, and granted, I guess from our perspective, it was, I guess we don't really know the reasoning. We have speculation as to why yourself and Paul and some of these other folks are getting this opportunity, but we were thrilled to hear it. You get a chance to call a game in the show. I guess, what was that like to know you're going to call an NHL game? And, was there still some of those first time butterflies, when you had it, going for your first game in the show?
It was a dream come true. As a Minnesota kid growing up, wanting to be a broadcaster, doing broadcast as you're playing out in the backyard or watching and listening to the local games, Vikings, Twins, North Stars, later on the Timberwolves. It was a dream come true. I had to pinch myself. I did 3 games at Chicago, at Vegas, and at Arizona in December of last year. And the first game was in Chicago, the national anthem, 20,000, people are dangling from the rafters. They were struggling, but they still had a huge crowd, and the atmosphere was just tremendous. And I was nervous. I had butterflies in the first drop of the puck. And, I thought I knew all of Chicago's numbers and names and everything. And I thought I did. And then all of a sudden, drop of the puck, and my mind goes blank. So I have to rely on my cheat sheet. But the first few minutes, it was like I was doing that first game ever back to 1992 at the Morris Civic Center. It was something, and I was able to work through it, obviously, and then settle in and just realize, hey, it's just a hockey game. And then it was a thrill working with Tom Reed, who I remember as a kid watching broadcasts. I never saw him play. I was too young for that, but was able to work with him, and that was a treat. And like I said, probably the broadcaster that had the biggest influence on my hockey style and my hockey broadcasting probably was Bob Kurtz, because I had a little bit of Al Shaver, but like I said before, most of my exposure to hockey broadcasting, we didn't get Hockey Night in Canada. When I was growing up on the farm, we didn't have cable TV. We had ABC, we had Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 9, Channel 11, and then we had Channel 29, the Kitten That Roars. But we never had any hockey network coverage, so it was Bob Kurtz. And to be able to meet him and talk with him has just been an absolute thrill. And I'm looking forward to the possibility of doing some more games again this year once the NHL season starts.
I definitely remember you jumping up in the press box, after you had done those slated games, and you had talked about, one of the coolest things was that, all the radio equipment was already set up for you. And in my head, I was kind of thinking, I think this was probably the same night that we dropped the Comrex in the snow on the way, bringing it from the university over to.
Whoops.
When you say we, full disclosure, it wasn't you or I. It was a broadcast partner. But we can, I guess, share all the same blame. But yeah, didn't know if that thing was going to work. It was quite frightening, to say the least. Oh my goodness.
So it was definitely interesting to hear about the step up. Apparently the NHL is a little bit higher level than what we do as student broadcasters. I don't know, but I don't know. But so kind of talking about, when you talked about how you've refined, your game, listening to these broadcasting greats that you grew up watching on TV or listening to on the radio. One of the things that you kind of confided in for us is talking about how, you're not a guy who, I guess, self-proclaimed thinks that he has this, amazing goal call per se. Like we know people who they have that natural gift. You can't really teach it. They just have that voice. And you talked about how you recognized where your strengths and not really weaknesses are, but where your real strengths were. And for you, it was the descriptive aspects of the radio, being able to describe those little plays of the game, what needs to be talked about, what doesn't, 4 players corner, giving fans numbers, especially, when they can't see the game. What's important for young broadcasters, especially for radio broadcasters, and a game that's so fast like hockey, things to kind of remember or pick out that are important to call a game that fast?
I think when you first start, you have to realize you're going to miss some things early on because the game, especially hockey, it is so fast that you need to get the basics in, try to get where the puck is at all times. I tell people and joke with people all the time. They'll ask me my thoughts on things, and I'll go, you know what? My main job is just to tell everybody what corner the puck is in, basically. I'm not an insider. I can't tell you all the intricacies and the ins and outs, but I can tell you what corner the puck is in. But that's the most important thing. Get as many names in, but paint the picture. Let people know where the puck is, what's going on. And really, another thing is it's just really simple. The time left in the period and the score, too. Weave that in, and you can do it during the action or make sure you do it whenever there's a whistle, setting up a stoppage, going to a break or whatever. But, like I said, I hadn't played the game when I first started. I just kind of felt my way and kind of created my own style for the most part with the help of what I used to hear on North Star games. And that's what people should do too. Yeah, you can emulate and take a little bit from some of the broadcasters that you listen to. Don't copy anybody. Don't maybe verbatim take one of their signature lines or something like that, or some of the things that you hear. Maybe try to develop your own style, but just get the basics in and do a lot of games. Get the reps in. That's one thing that I was able to do when I first started. As I said, get a lot of games in, get a lot of reps in, be yourself, maybe mix in some humor, a little bit of personality is nice in there as well. Don't take yourself too seriously, have some fun and listen to yourself. I think I listen to every game, at least a portion of every game that I do. Just to make sure that I still am coherent and people will like what they're hearing pretty much, man. And the other thing is you're never as good as you thought you were on a game. You call the game, you go, man, that's my best game ever. You listen to it. Oh, it's not as good as I thought. Or you call a game, you go, man, I butchered that. I was way off. I mean, how do I even still have a job? And then you listen to it later on, you go, oh, it wasn't nearly that bad. So, those are the things to keep in mind and to move forward and to use your knowledge. Preparation is important as well, but also the basics are very important to let people know what's going on when you're on the radio. Puck is left to right, right to left, left corner, right corner, near side wing, those kind of things. Those things are very important. I think the listener really gets engaged then. They feel like they're part of the game and you're there with them watching the game.
Jim, I guess my next question would be is, you have a very distinctive voice. I just want to know, I know you have some processing that's happening below you, but how do you get that deep, soulful voice? I mean, what kind of surgery can I get? Can I pull on some vocal cords? Just how do you get that nice, deep, resonating voice on the radio? And I think, there's some kind of truth to this because when, it's easy to get excited. It's easy to, kind of almost overblow your voice, in a sense. So how do you kind of keep yourself, part of a fan, but also to try to keep yourself as a broadcaster first?
Yeah, that's important. I try not to be over the top, and I don't think I'm over the top as far as yelling. And I don't know. I do 14 state hockey tournament games, and people ask me, how can you do 14 games in 4 days? And I go, I don't know. I did a lot of sports before, did a lot of games, high school, 5, 6, 7 games a week or whatever it was, sometimes double headers. And I don't know if that, calloused my vocal cords to the point where they don't, they don't weaken. I mean, I've gotten kind of hoarse a couple of times, but I've been able to make it through all 14 games. I don't know. Maybe it's, you drink a lot of Diet Barks root beer when you're young. That'll give you a low voice, or you maybe have a couple of organs removed. So, your upper chest cavity, you've got some opening there. So it's more resonant, kind of like a subwoofer, I guess. I don't know. It may be just genetics, and you go with it. You go with what you got. You dance with the one that brung you. So I do my best with what I have to work with.
You're awesome for trying to call me young, being that I'm going to be turning 34 on Friday. The only person that's young, on the three of us is this one over here that can barely girl a playoff beard, even if you give him even 2 months. So, I mean, come on, Noah. I mean, you can at least look in the mirror and try to push it out a little bit.
Okay. Well, that's a beard. I thought that was something on my screen.
All right.
Sorry, no, I had to do that. I'm sorry.
No, you made him speechless. That was, you made him speechless. Not many people can do that.
No, Grant has left the chat. Well, apparently from what you're telling me is that Barks root beer apparently puts hair on your chest. So I'm going to have to get on that.
Jim, it is the one with bite.
Yes, it is.
Jim, first of all, thanks again for joining us. I have 2 more questions, and Nick probably has one in between, because that's kind of how we do things here at the Huskies Warming House podcast. Let's kind of transition to some of your expert analysis, shall we say, of course, along with Dave Reichel, who's been with you for 4.5 years to this point. When you look at this team, coming up this year, a pretty interesting freshman class, obviously kind of a rebuilding year last year. And then the years before that, of course, were kind of the dynasty groups that never panned out. Kind of what have you experienced for St. Cloud State hockey as far as the transition and expectations for all of these teams? And what do you look forward to the most for this year's team if we do in fact have a season?
Well, I think you look at the fact that they have a lot of talent coming back, obviously with some of the folks, Nolan Walker, Sam Henches, just to name a couple. And of course, the young man from Finland, is it Vietnam that's coming?
Yep. Vietnam, yep.
Yeah. So I know he's not here yet. I think he's still taking online classes. So, did he get drafted? I didn't even see the second day of the draft yet.
He did. He was drafted in the 6th round by Toronto.
Okay.
So he's a Maple Leafs draft pick, yes.
So I'm excited to see him, and of course, a lot of scouts have said a lot of good things about him. So excited about the transfers, some of the veterans that they're bringing in. The 2 transfers look like they're going to be and bringing some experience here to this team. And of course, you start with the goaltending with David Rennick coming back again this year. But there are a lot of big holes to fill as well, with the Palings leaving, both Jack and Nick. They were just heart and soul guys and great leaders. And, of course, Jack Ashan as team captain, along with the other seniors that graduated as well. So this team is going to have, because of the loss of those seniors and the loss of Jack Ashan, who was a big part of this team, and the Palings were a big part of this team for so long, it's going to have a different identity, I think. There's going to be a new kind of new personality here this year. And the question will be, what will that personality be? And I think it's going to be a fun team to see some of those guys, the guys that have been here, and how they develop and take it again to a next level for the next year and improving what they've done in the past. And then to see some of those new pieces that are coming in here and how they mesh. And last year's freshmen, that freshman line at times, they were just amazing. And can they, in their sophomore year, take it up another notch or 2, which I think they can. But, it's just one of those things we'll wait and see. And how will the current climate change things? You see that at the other sports, everything else that is going around. Remember that these players, these athletes are humans, and they're going through all these things. They're testing and they're doing other stuff that they never did before. They might be separated from their family because of the pandemic and uncertain times and what we're going through right now. How does that affect these kids and their psyche and mentally? And how does that affect their performance on the field? So that's another X factor that is out there for all of these sports is what's going on in real life and how that impacts their preparation and so forth on the ice or whatever the playing field might be. So it'll be interesting to see once they set the schedule and decide on what they're going to do. Are they going to bubble in Omaha or what's going on? It'll be interesting to see. And then, let's drop the puck, and it'll be an odd season. It'll be an interesting season, and we'll just have to make do with what we have here and see what happens. And, hopefully everybody stays safe and we're able to finish and have a good season of hockey.
Jim, my last question is a recap of some not so great memories for Huskies hockey. Me and Noah had a conversation last episode about being a Huskies fan, and really more so some of the disappointment from the past couple of years. Again, we talk about AIC, we talk about Air Force, but as a broadcaster, you're there, you're broadcasting the game. You see the team on the ice. They're not playing the same. They're not getting the bounces. You can see the frustration. You're watching the clock ticking down, and you can just you can feel the energy is just not there. As a broadcaster, when you're supposed to be kind of, neutral, but you're still kind of that homer voice. What's it like, I guess, when you're looking and watching a team kind of just collapse in front of you? Just how difficult is it for a broadcaster to try to keep, some of that energy and some of that hope there? I guess, when do you kind of throw in the towel to know that, okay, I really got to just kind of encapsulate what the fans must be feeling at the moment?
I think like the AIC game, it was just, there was always hope there. It was always close enough that they'd be able to get something, and they did get the goal off of Eastern Brodzinski's helmet, right? And they gave themselves hope, and they were playing very well in the third period. And the one against Air Force, just going, okay, guys, let's get going. Maybe get a power play here. Let's get going. Here's an opportunity. Huskies have a chance to get in, and they just weren't. And I don't know. I think in both of those instances, I always had hope to the very end. I grew up, my first broadcasting, before we talked about it, I'm going to refer to it again. When I was first broadcasting games, I'd be broadcasting games with teams that had listeners from both teams, both schools. There would be a game and there'd be listeners from both schools. So I could not be a homer. I could not be impartial. I had to be impartial. I could not be biased. And I had to kind of call the game as it was. So if one team is playing disappointingly, but the other team's playing real well, I got to balance that out somehow. And I can't show any favoritism there, and at the same time, badmouth team that's playing poorly. So I think my training as a broadcaster through that is a reason that I'm not a big homer. I don't bark at the referees on the air. I try not to do that, or try not to complain about the referees that much. That comes from that background, I think. So I think I just call the game straight out. I'll tell the listeners that, hey, they're not playing very well. They need to do something to get going here. I'm not going to go into the dumps and start crying on the air or start whining. Oh, my team, what's going on? We can't win. Oh, it's another, one of those things, just kind of call it straight, call it through, and just say, call a spade a spade. What it is. The team did not show up. Right now, the team isn't playing very well. They need to turn things around in the third period, something like that, but that's just kind of my style. It's kind of straightforward, I think, for the most part. And I don't know how to describe it, really. Just kind of going out there and doing what I do. I call them as I see them, pretty much.
Well, hopefully my last question for you is straightforward. And again, Jim, like we mentioned, thanks for joining us. You're a guy that, if anyone has been around the Herbrooks National Hockey Center early or later after the game, an average hockey game, let's say, if it's a long game, takes 2.5, 3 hours max. That's a game with some sort of maybe an injury or something like that. And obviously broadcasters, they have to prep a little bit, but you're kind of really known for the meticulous way about how early you get to the rink. You're usually there 2-3 hours, at minimum before the game, and then you're there for probably 2 hours at least after the game. Did you kind of develop that, that preparation, that skill set of understanding making sure that everything, double check, recheck, what can you tell young broadcasters about that? And then lastly, what's your favorite part about game day that doesn't have to include broadcasting? When you go to the rink, you get all your stuff set up, you're sitting, maybe you grab a hot dog or something. What's something that you just love about being in a college hockey arena on game day?
I'll answer the first one first. And a lot of it goes to that point where you're setting up your own equipment and you want to make sure everything works. And if something doesn't work, you want to have time to be able to come up with plan B or find a way to fix it or whatever. So you have time, and you don't want that to interrupt the time that you go down and talk to the players. You do pregame interviews and talk to the coaches and the other things that you might be doing. And I hate being rushed. I don't want to be rushed leading to the broadcast. And that's happened before. You have been rushed before. You just don't want to have it happen all the time or a lot. And you don't want a small little issue. I've only been rushed when it's been a big issue, like when a big piece of equipment, your Comrex or whatever you're using, your telephone hybrid, whatever you're using to get the audio to the radio station. When that goes down, you got to find plan B and you got to get going and hope it doesn't go down right before you go on the air. But that's the main thing. Get there early so you're prepared for everything. You can talk to people. You're not rushed. You can be cordial and maybe get some tidbits about the game and things like that. So, at the end, it's just wind down time. And if Mick Hatton asked me to be on his Facebook Live at the end, then I'm there even later, which is fine with me because as you can tell, I like being on camera. And then the other thing is I love when the arena is quiet. I love being there when it's quiet. I usually get there. I might be the first one up in the press box. A lot of times I am. Sometimes some of the camera people are up there as well from Husky Productions. And then Tom Nelson will show up there eventually so he can open up the refrigerator so I can get a Diet Coke and get going. But that's my favorite part. And then something that I started doing last year because I was getting to the rink early enough was just to walk around. I like to walk around the concourse. I realized one year, maybe it was last year, I'd been doing this for 3 years and I'd never walked around the concourse in the new edition. I'd been down by the locker rooms. I'd been up to the Husky Den and been up by where the elevators are and so forth, but I'd never been in the concourse on that side, especially on game day, just to kind of feel the preparation and the concession stands and what are they serving at the concession stands. I didn't know. I was just so focused on calling games those first couple of years that I was finally kind of comfortable enough that, hey, everything's set up in the press box. I'm going to take 15 minutes just to walk around the arena here, just kind of get the feel, maybe let things settle a little bit here and then get mentally focused to call a Husky victory, hopefully. So that's probably my favorite thing is that quiet time and then a chance just to kind of walk around and be in your own little zone.
Well, Jim, legend still has it that Tom Nelson still hasn't opened up the fridge yet for us to get something to drink. Return of the Mac is still playing. Return of the Mac is still I don't know. I think I will forever remember Jim Erickson. If there's anything, is him turning around and saying, "Are they playing this damn song again?"
It's almost like you can remember the playlist. It's just it's the same one.
It is. Well, then it's it's good to have a routine. It's good to have a routine. Then when Return of the Mac comes on, then you've got 20 minutes until you got to start your pregame show. It's all part of clockwork. And one other tidbit, one thing I want to mention, there was one year that I was out of broadcasting in Iowa when Iowa Stars lost their affiliation. I was in Des Moines for a year and I was out of broadcasting. I was broadcasting games. And I actually sold Kirby vacuums during a summer to get through the summer of not broadcasting. So I credit, I still have a Kirby vacuum here at the house somewhere. And I credit that. I have to credit the Kirby Vacuum Company for giving me the willingness to get back into broadcasting and to continue along. I don't know if you've ever used a Kirby. It's a powerful machine.
They're not made of plastic. I know that for sure.
Heavy duty. Duty.
Again, the voice of the St. Cloud State men's hockey team on Baba FM at 96.7 The River, Jim Erickson. Again, thank you for joining us. Hope to see you next door to us as we hopefully, have a college hockey season coming up here. as soon as next month. And take care. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks again for joining us.
Guys, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work. And, of course, stay safe, too. Hope to see you at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center very soon.
Thanks. Thank you, Jim. Will do.
Take the Huskies Warming House podcast wherever you go. Find the newest episodes or listen to your favorite on iTunes and Podbean. Get all the latest news and updates at huskieswarminghousepodcast.com and look for our Facebook page, the Huskies Warming House Podcast, as well as our Twitter feed at Warming House Den. Our Twitter feed will host trivia, updates, and questions for fans, as well as a mailbag where you can tweet us anytime with your questions, concerns, or listener suggestion. And for business inquiries, email us at huskieswarminghousepodcast@outlook.com.
And once again, thanks again to Jim Erickson, the radio voice of the St. Cloud State men's hockey team, as well as the play-by-play TV voice for the Minnesota State High School Hockey Tournament in March, also known as the Tourney. Noah, again, just can't say enough nice things about our guest, Jim Erickson. Just an absolutely fantastic gentleman.
Yeah, always a pleasure to talk to you. And speaking of the tournament, like you just mentioned, the tournament happens at the Xcel Energy Center, as have some changes with Bill Guerin and company of the Minnesota Wild. Their current depth chart right now, Kaprizov, Marcus Johansson, Kevin Fiala would potentially be the top line, followed by Parisi, Joel Erickson X, Zuccarello, Jordan Greenway, Benino, Bukestad, Marcus Foligno, Victor Rask, Ryan Hartman, and Nico Sturm round out that potential forward core, as well as Marco Rossi in there. Ryan Suter, Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Matt Dumba, Carson Soucy, Brad Hunt, and Greg Patern are kind of the peg defensemen moving into next year. And then, of course, Cam Talbot and Alex Stalock, as well as Kaapo Kakkonen, would be your goaltending trio there, Nick. But how do we get here? Bill Guerin, kind of a man with a plan, I think would be the easiest way to put this. As said this morning, he said it's an opportunity for players in a contract here to put their best foot forward. It's a great place to play, great place to live. He knows the players love it here. If you want to stay here, here's their opportunity. But if you don't, we'll find something else that works for you. So very, very interesting. He said he likes the moves that the team has made, and he feels the team is better when as they're sitting right now than where they were at the beginning of the offseason. So what did they do in the offseason, Nick? We're going to touch on the draft last. Let's talk about kind of the movements and signings that the Minnesota Wild have had real quick here. Of course, today they signed goaltender Cam Talbot at 3 years, 3.67 average annual value. Traded center/wing Luke Cunnin to Nashville for center Nick Bonino. Cunnin's 23, had 31 points last year and was a 15th selection in the 2016 draft, while Bonino is 32 and had 35 points last year and has 1 year left on his current deal. Speaking of two guys that have a year left in their current deal, Eric Stahl was swapped for Marcus Johansson in Buffalo. Stahl's turning 37 with 47 points last year, while Johansson is 30, kind of a speedy playmaking type forward centerman with 30 points entering his last contract here. And then, of course, the two trades that we mentioned to San Jose in the last segment, Devin Dubnyk and Ryan Donato both headed to San Jose for a 5th, 7th, and 3rd round pick respectively. And then Nico Sturm re-signed for 2 years at $1.45 million total value. And Carson Soucy re-signed for 3 years at $2.75 average annual value. Matt Robson and Devin Falkowski were not extended qualifying offers, but Joseph Grammarosa and Dakota Murmis were signed to 1-year, 2-way contracts today. So those have been kind of the moves that Bill Guerin and company have kind of thrown for us as Minnesota Wild fans. Not talking about the draft quite yet, Nick. What do you think about, these moves so far? For me, I like the Bonino and Cunnin swap. I think it opens up a lot of possibilities down the road, especially with the Seattle expansion draft. For me, I think it burns a little bit that Ryan Donato went for only a 3rd. I feel like he's more of a 2nd-round selection just because he's a potential 20-goal scorer. I know some people have talked about Carson Soucy's contract being a little bit too heavy in the average annual value department. What's good and what's not for you as a quote-unquote expert NHL and Minnesota Wild fan?
The Luke Cunnin and Nick Bonino trade is, that one's good and bad for me. I really liked Luke Cunnin. I thought he was emerging, especially late last season. He's a young kid. He's a leader. He was the captain of the Wisconsin Badgers for the 2 years he was with the club. Also played, for our Team USA for the World Juniors. Right shot type center/wing. You can't really get a lot of those nowadays. So to me, sad to really see him go. But again, Nick Bonino comes in. little bit older, can still produce a lot of points. He's a guy that can play a true center. To me, he's going to be the third line center. Is a guy that plays with a little bit of physicality. He's a great forechecker. And when he needs to finish, he can come up with some big clutch goals. And of course, Bonino and Bill Guerin know each other well, both on and off the ice. So it's a hard swap for me. I would have liked to keep Cunnin, but again, we go back to the flat cap. Cunnin was an RFA. He's due for a new contract in Nashville. Bonino just takes over a $4.1 million 1 year left on a deal. So it's a low risk, high reward potential situation for the Wild. And then you go back to the Eric Staal trade. This one, to me, I like Johansson coming back. It was hard for me to see Eric Staal go away. Eric Staal, we talked about before, loves this area, again, from Thunder Bay, Ontario, just north of the Minnesota Iron Range border there. He was building a retirement home here in Minnesota. I think he still is, but he's now going to be having to finish at least the next season in Buffalo. I think he's embracing it as what it is, but a good character guy, but no question, like the younger forward coming back in Marcus Johansson, a guy who I think has some good skill. And we forgot to mention, we still haven't seen Kaprizov yet. This is kind of, the thing about all these moves is there's intrigue there for me, Noah. And the part of it is this could go really, really well. It could also go really, really bad. But I like the GM making necessary what he feels changes and feels like there's a plan there. Carson Soucy, I agree, was a little bit on the steeper side. Now, the good news potentially here for the Wild is Greg Patterin, who's been rehabbing from, I believe, a core muscle surgery, is still not been cleared yet to play. He could open the season on the injured reserve, which would save some cap hit. So maybe that's why Carson Soucy gets the deal that he does as insurance for Greg Patterin. Again, he only has 1 year left in his deal, so does Brad Hunt. And so maybe the Wild are looking at that and go, after these guys' last year, their deals are gone, maybe they don't really look future as them coming back. So maybe it's that insurance thing with Carson Soucy. But let's get to the big one, Cam Talbot, right? $3.66 million for the next 3 years, $11 million total. This is a very smart signing for the Minnesota Wild. Yes, if we wind the clocks back 2 years, Talbot was pretty much almost ready to walk away from the National Hockey League. The problem that people aren't looking at with Talbot here in the state of hockey is which team was he on and how good defensively was that team? They were terrible. Cam Talbot did not have enough help in front of him in Edmonton. He resurged his career a little bit in Calgary, and now he comes over to Minnesota with arguably, not arguably an expensive defensive roster, but supposed to be a very good one, right? Re-signed Jonas Brodin. We forgot to mention that. We talked about the last couple of episodes. So he should get help here, right? So to me, Talbot doesn't have to do too much. But another reason why you bring in Talbot, not like a Corey Crawford, not a Jacob Markstrom is, well, guess what? You're going to have to start paying some of these younger forwards. Kevin Fiala, Kaprizov, if he starts, to emerge. And how about this? Again, Marcus Johansson. What about Nick Bonino? Some of these guys that maybe are on a 1 or 2 years left, maybe you want to extend them. You have to have money, and you already know you have a flat cap. So this was such a smart signing for Bill Guerin. And to me, with that defense there, this is where it all is for Minnesota. Their defense, both from the forwards and especially the defensive core, it's on their shoulders now. This is where the team is going to have to win their games, and when they lose it, it's going to be from the hands of the defense. So to me, I like what Bill Guerin's doing here, considering the external factors with the flat cap, as well as trying to restructure this team to be more competitive, as well as to bring in some more skill up front. I like the moves. I like what he's doing, and to me, it makes sense. Now we just have to wait and see if it all actually comes together and flows well.
Yeah, the Minnesota Wild gave up the least amount of high-danger opportunities last year, but Devin Dubnyk allowed the most high-danger goals of any NHL goaltender. So Cam Talbot has the potential to be a real upgrade, and worst comes to worst, Seattle takes him in the expansion draft because you might have to expose one goaltender, especially, or if he gets exposed or traded because he has no move clause, Kaapo Kähkönen might finally develop and be the guy, the franchise goaltender of the future. You definitely never know. But speaking of the future, Nick, for our final segment of Minnesota Wild moves, the NHL draft, of course, the Minnesota Wild had 5 selections ultimately at the end of the day in the draft. We're going to start from the back end and work our way to the top here, Nick. Right wing Pavel Novak of the Kelowna Rockets in the 5th round at number 146. Kind of an offensive heavy player, a guy who has a real good hockey IQ, an absolute cannon of a shot, and kind of a power play specialist. Had an impressive first year in North America, 25 goals, 58 points in 55 games in the WHL. Nick, this is kind of obviously this is our real later round pick. Is there anything that is a knock to Pavel Novak's game, or something that you're excited about him as a late round pick?
For late round picks, first of all, let's remember that Pavel Datsyuk was a 6th round pick and Henrik Zetterberg was a 7th round pick for Detroit. Do these happen often? No. But for Novak, you like to see a player excel at least one thing. If he's got a good shot and he's a power play specialist, that's at least something. What probably tells me if you're a later round pick is if something's missing, right? It's either your skating, maybe where you are without the puck, maybe your defensive game is struggling. But, to me, if you're going to lack something, lack maybe some of the hockey IQ, because you can teach that. What you can't teach is a good shot, and you can't really teach up after a certain age good skating habits. So to me, it's a good 5th round pick if he's got a good shot. Against a late round pick, maybe needs more time to develop. Good to see it. And, so far a 5th round pick, not too bad. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, the biggest, like they talk about, like you mentioned with the late round picks, the big thing is to find a guy that excels really well at one thing and hope to develop the rest, as opposed to your earlier round picks, you hope they're the complete package. The big knock on Pavel Novak right now is that he's not exactly the most physical guy and gets knocked off pucks a little bit, but has a good compete level. So we should see, as does everybody else in this draft class. That was kind of the big overarching trend here, was guys with good compete here. In the 3rd round at number 65, the Moose Jaw Warriors gave us a draft pick in Damon Hunt. Hunt had a really tough season. He missed most of the campaign after a skate blade cut his arm. He's a pretty good defender, kind of a hard-nosed defender, a real physical shutdown kind of guy. Kind of reminds me of our 2nd round pick at number 39 that we traded within the Luke Cunnin trade, defenseman Ryan O'Rourke from Sault Ste. Marie. Really smart defenseman. He's not a guy that jumps out on you on the ice, but, kind of a good overall, guy that plays really heavy minutes. Reminds me a lot of Jonas Brodin, where he'll take that, that matchup and be able to shove it right back in that offensive player's face. He's, very, very physical, going to play those tough minutes, which I think it's funny when people say tough minutes. Like, part of me is like, all the minutes in hockey are tough, but yeah. What that means is matching up against, the first and second lines of the opposing teams and being able to suppress shot attempts by those groups. So Nick, out of those 2 defensemen, anything that really sticks out to you that excites you about some of these D-men with a little bit of grit and tenacity?
What we're seeing as a trend, for NHL teams, especially in the younger defensemen, is you're trying to counteract speed. And the best way we know how to do that in hockey is to play physical, right? With Damian Hunt as well as Ryan O'Rourke, they're both, they call themselves shutdown defensemen. I would say Ryan O'Rourke is more of the self-proclaimed physical defenseman. And, especially if there's one area of concern for me for the Wild in front of the net, I love Jonas Brodin as a defenseman, especially with his skating. Jared Spurgeon just so good and sound positionally. Ryan Suter, for his age, he still angles himself well. He knows how to play, knows how to be in the right spot. Matt Dumba can be physical at times, but we really don't have a guy that, to me, is a guy that you can stick in front of the net and try to push somebody out of the way of your goaltender for vision. Both of these guys kind of have a little extra tenacity, a little extra grit to them that you kind of need in today's NHL, because what teams are doing now, we saw this in the playoffs, is they're really trying to crowd that crease. You have to let your goaltender see the puck for him to save it. So I like these 2 picks. Again, the young defensemen, they got some stock to build up, but I like the fact that, again, they're gritty. They have a high compete level. You need that in defensive core. Maybe the only drawback to both of them, again, not the greatest of skaters, but you got to take that little bit of hit if you're going to have that physical play in front.
Minnesota Wild started off the draft with a couple of centermen. One that obviously was real high on our board, and we're shocked that he dropped to the position he did for the Minnesota Wild. But in the 2nd round, we'll start with a name that I am bound to butcher here in the 2nd round at number 37, coming over from Russia. I believe it's Marat Kuznetsov. Is that Kuznetsov? I don't know. Not for me to say. What I can tell you, Nick, is he has some pretty high-end skill components to his game, really creative player, sees the ice really well, and makes those pretty unique, tough plays to teammates, and a great skater, good edge work, kind of a speedy little water bug type player. So he's an interesting pick. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one, as well as the big one at number 9 in the 1st round from the Ottawa 67s, Marco Rossi, kind of an undersized guy, but an absolute competitive, natured type player, drives the net constantly, good penalty killer with a good 200-foot game, good skill and production. Obviously, he won the Eddie Powers Memorial Trophy as the OHL's top scorer. One NHL scout has compared him to Nico Hischier with a little more bite to his game. Just to put that in perspective, Hischier has 135 points in 209 NHL games as the first overall pick for the New Jersey Devils. He's a guy that might not be top tier for size and speed, but he's going to project to be a top-line NHL forward because of his smart and skilled hockey IQ. Nick, both of these picks, maybe let's start with the Russian, who I can't pronounce, and then finish with Marco Rossi. What are your final thoughts on the first two moves of each day for the Minnesota Wild?
So first of all, the Russian Marat Kuznetsov.
Thank you.
There you go. Yes. High-end skill player. The one thing out of Russia you're going to get is, incredible speed, incredible soft hands, and a good shot. You're going to get that with these Russian players. Marat's no different there. Just a high-end offensive machine. Again, the 200-foot game is the question mark for Russian players. Again, the KHL is a different type of hockey altogether. When they typically make their transition to North America, if they get that opportunity, learning that defensive side of the game is where they tend to either excel, or sort of come back, kind of reality a little bit. For this young gentleman, I've heard nothing but good things as far as his hockey IQ is concerned. And again, when you can skate, you don't necessarily need to know how to do a lot of things, but if you can just skate your rear end off through the middle of the ice and take a body, sometimes it's all you need to do. So a lot of good things to the Marat. I want to go to Marco Rossi because this kid is incredibly impressive. He's only the second Austrian ever to be drafted in the first round. The other Austrian, we know him very well, is former golfer Thomas Vanek. So, I watched a couple of things not only on tape as well as a good feature that Sportsnet did on him, and what an incredibly mature young man this guy is. His composure off the ice just spells leadership. His coach up there, again, for the Ottawa 67s just calls him, that extra competitive guy. He has been very vocal that he thinks he needs to get a little bit faster on his skates, but very, very good shot. Hockey IQ, knows how to create. So when you talk about a playmaking center, this is what Minnesota wants, right? Mikko Koivu was never the playmaking center. He was the shutdown center, right? So for Marco Rossi coming in, he's going to add, some of that offensive skill involved to the center ice position. You have two really explosive wingers on this roster now. You have Kevin Fiala. You now have Kirill Kaprizov. You have an opportunity where, to me, why wouldn't you experiment with this? Honestly, you have 9 games anyway. Put Rossi out there with Fiala as well as Kaprizov and see what he can do. Why not take that first 9 games? And if he doesn't pan out, you can send him back to juniors for a year, let him develop a little bit. To me, there's no harm in doing so, but I'm really excited for this prospect. He's got all the tools to make himself a number 1, at the latest number 2 center in the National Hockey League. And again, surprising he fell this low to number 9. I think some draft boards had him as high as number 4 in this draft. And, to fall to number 9, you talk about GMs who are looking to, kind of predict everybody else's draft board. And you have scenarios of whether you would trade up to get a guy, or maybe like Calgary did. They traded down multiple times because, again, their guy was still available. To me, they didn't have to do anything. I think in whole, Bill Guerin just nailed this draft on paper. Now, which prospects of these actually transition to the NHL, which ones do not, we have yet to see. But home run to me on Marco Rossi here. Again, maybe slightly undersized for a centerman, but if you have skill, if you have speed, you have IQ, you can overcome those. And I think Marco Rossi will definitely overcome those.
Yeah, the big challenge for the Wild is Cole Perfetti at number 10 did end up in Winnipeg. There's another guy that's going to be real dangerous offensively. Marco Rossi is a guy for me that kind of makes me think of Mikhail Granlund with a set of stones on him. Honestly, a guy that's not afraid to go into the corners, a good playmaker right there. Like you mentioned, him and Thomas Vanek, the only Austrians to go in the top 10 in the NHL first round. The other Austrian to only go in the first round at number 14 was Michael Grabner. So very, very interesting to see what Rossi can do. Corey Pryman, of course, in his draft boards gave our organizational rating number 15 in terms of our pipeline and gave our draft grade a B+, which I think that's fair. B+, A-, somewhere around there. So, but you know what? Even if we are number 15 in organizational rankings, our fans, of course, are number 1, the best in college hockey. We thank you for listening to this very, very long edition of the Huskies Warming House Podcast. course, we had a lot to touch on here in free agency. Hopefully we'll let Nick maybe host so that this never happens again. But Nick, happy 34th birthday to you. Go out and enjoy some schnapps or something.
We'll do just a late signing. Torrey Krug just signed with the St. Louis Blues, so no longer a Boston Bruin. So for a former St. Cloud State University captain in Jack Sean, who is a very similar player, maybe he gets a look with the Boston Bruins again. Torrey Krug to the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, well, I don't know, Nick. I'm pretty sure we're going to get signed by the Bruins tomorrow, right? That's got to be, right?
I'm expecting the contract sheet in the mail tomorrow, yes.
Yeah, so we might be MIA tomorrow as we're signing our first pro contracts, but we're going to sign off from here. Episode number 32. Happy to have you join us, and get ready for episode number 33 with Ben Holden that will be joining us next week. Should be a fun one, and have a wonderful week from the Huskies Warming House Podcast.